welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for NSU Art Museum, Fort Lauderdale's Art Talk with Miami-based artist Jared McGriff. I'm delighted to announce that NSU Art Museum purchased 2 of Jared's paintings last month for the permanent collection. The purchase of the 2 paintings by Jared McGriff was made possible by the museum's Docent Council and Susan Miller. Now, I want to mention that this was a very strategic gift on the part of our docents and Susan Miller. The docents are our main intermediaries with the public, and they know firsthand how important the collection is and how the museum can play an important role in supporting emerging artists. This is the kickoff for what's always been a very big week in South Florida, Art Basel, Miami Art Week. And of course, this is going to be a different year in that almost everything is virtual. And even though it's a little different this year, Jared is especially kicking it off in a big way with his new show at Spinello Projects in Miami, and that you can see in person, not just virtually. And he was featured yesterday in a full-page article in the New York Times on Miami Art Week, including the reproduction of one of his paintings and a photograph of Jared himself. Thank you for being here. It's a very busy week and probably busier than you ever anticipated.
Truly, yes. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And you moved to Miami a few years ago to concentrate on your art. And here you are today with a major gallery exhibition during Art Week. You have works in major museums and private collections, and you get this prominent coverage in the New York Times. So my question for you, do you think you made the right decision to move to Miami?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, making the move to Miami was a great choice.
Yeah.
Being able to practice here and work within such a vibrant art community is definitely a privilege, and I feel like making the move here was the best choice for my career.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, it certainly looks that way. So let's talk a little bit about your life and background, and then you'll take us through presentation of your work.
I actually grew up in Central California, so I grew up in so it's the rural part of California. It's the agricultural center of the state, and I didn't have a ton of exposure to the arts there. I grew up in a place called Tulare, California, which is it's the biggest thing that goes on there is the agriculture. It's called the Ag Fair, which is an international farm equipment exposition. So the art was not a big
quite Art Basel.
Yeah, it's the art Basel of farm equipment, and so there was no big concentration on art there. But I grew up obsessed with drawings. And I drew constantly on all surfaces and everything I could as a young person, and but the idea of practicing art, full time as a career was something that never crossed my mind.
Well, I love when I visited your studio, you showed me all these stacks of sketchbooks. And so that was really, clearly it's almost an obsession with you with drawing. And I know you brought some for us to see later. Now, but instead of art school, you studied architecture at Berkeley. How did that experience shape your work?
The architecture program at Berkeley when I was there was very old school in a way. So I did everything by hand in terms of plans and design. It was before everything was computer based in terms of building the models and plans. So that experience of doing everything by hand, and really focusing on the line. For my studio professors were very adamant about having a good hand. So that really informed my practice, and it kind of set the foundation for my obsession of keeping sketchbooks and building up, this idea of working out ideas, on paper, with a pen, and kind of this, very simple kind of
Mhm.
manner that's been done for thousands of years, thousands of years, really.
Yeah. And- But it's all changed now. So it was
Yeah,
really good
yeah,
that you were
totally.
there at that cusp between
Yes,
analog and digital. Perhaps your work would have taken a completely different turn,
for sure.
if you had just missed that cutoff point. So
Right.
um,
Yep.
so so then you got this architecture degree, but you went to NYU to get an MBA.
Right.
Um, what was that? What was your focus in your MBA?
Yeah. So, in my mind, still, based on my background, not having a ton of exposure to artists and the idea of art practice, I was always focused on kind of practical uh, career choices, if you will. So I focused on finance and entrepreneurship in business school. And when I was in New York, I was beginning to do a lot more painting, just on my own, and it became a kind of a balance, if you will,
Mhm,
to sort of other kind of career pursuits.
mhm.
um, and I started taking it, more seriously, kind of after grad school, after the financial crisis, actually, when it was kind of thinking more about like how I wanted to spend my time, and what I wanted to do, with myself, essentially.
So after you got your degree from NYU, you went back to the Bay Area and worked in finance and in startups.
Correct.
Well, that was the right
Yes.
place to be. So
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
okay, so you had this career. Um, why why did you make this brave decision to focus completely on your art?
Yeah, I wanted to, in thinking and kind of interrogating what I wanted to do with my career and my time, even, and kind of who I wanted to spend my time with. I started doing a lot of um, just kind of personal work, and going to museums, and going to openings and things like that, because I was always interested in drawing. I spent hours and hours after my day job, so to speak, to work on art, and I started painting in watercolor on a daily basis to work out some of these ideas. So really, my decision to pursue my art practice full time was really sort of this idea of aligning my personal interests with where I saw my career going, and that's kind
Yeah.
of the basic answer to that.
Mhm. And then you made this other brave decision to come to Miami. Um,
Yeah,
why, of all the places you could have gone, did you choose Miami?
in my view, in going to in kind of visiting places, I found that Miami had lower barriers to entry, really, in terms of um, access to people in the art community. And I noticed that folks were really open-minded here to engage with emerging artists, and it seemed like it was a community that was very vibrant in terms of the number of institutions and galleries, and even so, from a civic standpoint, there seemed to be a lot of focus on art, and I thought
Mhm.
this is kind of a smaller city in a way, and it has all of these resources around artists, so it'd be a great place to kind of set a foundation in terms
Mhm.
of my painting practice.
Mhm. Well, you made a right choice. And, if I was an analyst, I would say that's the same thing I tell artists, move to Miami.
Right.
because of, or South Florida, because there is so many resources and support and institutions that do look at the local artists. That doesn't happen in many other places.
Right.
I could tell for a fact. And there's a lot more opportunity. Yeah, there is this much more open kind of society that people can move in and out and be welcomed.
Yes.
You know, so that's, you know, that was a really good analysis. Now, the other thing that we talked about is how your family background has created a kind of mythology that drives your work. Can you share a little bit about your family history and how that goes into your work?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from the West Coast, but my family is from the South. We, through like Georgia and Mississippi and things like that, we transitioned after the enslavement period to the West Coast. So in that there were I just have a ton of like rich background and history. I know a lot about these migrations. And although my family is rather is strange and not exactly close, these kind of stories frame my understanding of my family's experience. So a lot of these stories from, kind of this people who were living on, reservations in Oklahoma and sharecropping in Texas and living in isolate Black communities in Oklahoma before moving to California, like this kind of tapestry, it fuels my work and kind of my historical understanding of my place here within the United States, and it really makes my practice, it makes it into my practice. It makes it into the works. All of my work is imagined portraiture. So I think some of these stories and some of this kind of rich background makes it into the figures and images that I create.
Well, this seems like the perfect time to segue into looking at your work in depth. And, this was a great background, and now we can see how it all works into your painting.
These are some selected works, and I'll start here with this image, which is Two on Top of the World. This is a piece that was acquired by you and the docents there. And this is a 60 by 62 inches oil on canvas. So just to sort of speak a little bit about the work, this piece is really, it's a good example of the type of work I create, in that it started as a sketch and made it to and just based on the sketch, I kind of thought, hey, this encapsulates some of the ideas that I've been thinking about, and I began, taking it to the canvas. And so the sketches I create are very, limited in a lot of ways, and kind of abstract even. And this piece, once I added the paint and the layers of paint to the image, some of these ideas became, even more clear. And this piece is called The Black and Mild and the Henny. And this is uh, two people engaging in an interaction. A lot of my work is about how individuals relate to each other, and how they relate to the environment, and even how they relate to themselves. And I think this image is definitely representative of those ideas around, two individuals in space involved in some interaction that's unclear. In my mind, it's like a casual interaction, and then they're almost interrupted or at least engaged by the viewer in some capacity. So that's an example of some of these works that have that engagement with the viewer. And I really like to I like to think of my work almost as narrative fiction in a way, because it gives a specific, there's some character development, but there's also an engagement with the viewer, so that viewer is also very, very involved in the what the idea of the piece is. Whoever's viewing it kind of takes on their own meaning, and that's what I like about the practice of painting in terms of how it can provide this foundation for exploration, and can be an interesting way for the viewer to practice and develop their own imagination. This image is titled, or the piece is titled, "So You Was Never There Anyway," and this is very much representative of the works that I develop within my practice. This piece was created, spontaneously. I, began with abstract, almost drawing with the paint, and added, layers and until a figure sort of arrived. And what's key about this piece, it's a little more difficult to see because we're digital, but once in person there's variants of white, and there are definitely like pieces of the figure that fade into the background, and the background and the foreground is almost confused in some aspects. There are aspects of the figure that simply disappear into the background. Pieces of the figure disappear into the image of the clothing rather. And but at the same time, the image has its own presence within space. So that's in terms of making these figurative works, it's important for me to really show that these individuals are worth considering, if that makes sense. So even though the figures are sometimes blended into the background, there's still I intend to always present a strength of the figure within space, and within the environment. This piece is titled Overseer Officer. And I think this is about 70 inches or 74 inches by 62 or so. This is another work that is in the current exhibition. There's a lot of symbolism here, and essentially, and with the title as well, the idea is kind of discussing some of the ambivalence or reticence that individuals may have when working within a system that is that can be considered dubious in terms of the communities that these systems are within. So that's what this work is really about, and it's sort of engaging these two individuals and in how they are how they are dealing with this system, how they're dealing with each other. The clothing that I have them in here is not police wear, but these are police, and the clothing is maybe representative of another time or even another career. And some people think, oh, maybe these are orderlies. Are they health workers, or are they police? So I mean, advancing certain conversations here that individuals can think about systems and think about people within systems, and maybe even think about themselves and how they relate to these people and these systems. So this is an example of that dynamic. This is called Four in the Park, and I'm not sure of the dimensions actually, but I think this is about like 48 by 36 or so. These are this is kind of this is in oil. This is oil on canvas, but I painted this in a style that I paint a lot of my watercolor works with, in that it's very loose, and I'm kind of letting the material and the medium breathe on the canvas, and letting some of the layers show in a way where I'm hoping to communicate the levity of this scene, and the kind of casualness of the individuals within the image, really to highlight this idea of again of levity and play, almost with individuals. So it's kind of that snapshot in time that is, it's unfamiliar in terms of how the figures are sort of, loosely treated, but very familiar in terms of this pose, or of this type of scene. These sketches are directly from sketchbooks, or books that I have turned into sketchbooks, because I draw on lined notebook paper as well, that I intend to just write text in, but I end up drawing all over. This image is a good snapshot of my sketchbook. I mean, this was actually the reference sketch for the painting that I showed previously, that is now in the permanent collection there. It's these were the two girls in kind of like a rural setting, with a building in the back, but this is the reference sketch. And when I made this sketch, I didn't intend for this to be necessarily a larger work, but I definitely wanted to capture this relationship between the two figures, and those two figures almost as a unit within space. And that's what this sketch communicated to me as I drew it more in a spontaneous fashion, and then decided to take that spontaneity and take it to the canvas. These are other examples of sketches, and you see, I'm very active with the whatever pen or pencil I'm using. I with abstract marks always, and I build from there. So you can see these two figures. This is actually, I haven't created a larger work based on this sketch, but there's certain things around shadows and the positions of the limbs, and of the view of the individuals that I might reference in a larger painting. On the right side of the page is a watercolor sketch. And here, I mean, we still see like the importance of the line. The line is always really, really important to me, but this again started as, abstract, just abstract marks. And then as I see a figure sort of arriving, I create, a larger image and create layers. But here it's, just, I believe it's just, brown and black and blue that I use to create this image on the right. And this is a sketch of a piece that we actually, I think was in this presentation, which was Hoovers Sun, which is in the exhibition. This was the reference sketch for that piece. And here it's, this is on like graph paper. Like I said, I draw on line paper and graph paper. And this is also, since I use this for a reference, I probably have, oil paint and medium and everything else on this page. So this is kind of an example of the patina within my sketchbook itself. And then let's go to, these are a few images from the installation. This is the room that Bonnie's in now, actually. And this is, these are the one of the works that will be at NSU, and another piece where I did a series with those two individuals and on their horses. It's kind of this ahistorical, like, counter narrative. And that's a series of two works. And there's another piece. This room is sort of about it's about absurdity and violence and history. The image there on the left is the painting I was mentioning that I used that sketch to reference when I created this work. This is the overseer officer piece, as well as this larger dancing figure that is one of the key, it's like the key piece within the exhibition. The exhibition is called Only Touching the Ground to Jump, and it's about the sort of performance and the necessity of performance in everyday life. Are there any questions about that, or?
Do you work with models or just your imagination?
It's all of the works are imagination. It's all imagined portraiture. So I don't work with models or photography in any capacity. And I think, my work is, for me, it's as I mentioned before, like, I did a lot of painting on my own, and I always, before I shared my work, I always viewed my work as extremely, like, very personal. So these were almost like meditations. So I really focus on my imagination to create works. I do sometimes think, my practice is heavily observational.
Your figures often seem to look directly at the viewer. Can you explain your thinking in doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it is often, intentional, and it's really I do love photography, and I think I'm borrowing from photography in that way. And the reason why is because it does engage the viewer, and it makes the viewer think about the figure. I think it does. And it puts the viewer almost in the environment with the painting. And these are two kind of, things I like to sort of play with, this idea of observation, and this idea of engaging with the environment of the work. So that's why I do that. It's definitely something something I'm borrowing from photography that connects with the viewer.
Our next question says, have you found that the recent re-energizing of the Black Lives Matter movement have made its way into your work?
I think there are elements of that have made it into the work. I mean, mainly it's about, seeing, seeing the value in individuals as they are. And I think that's always been important to my work, and the figures that I work with. But definitely whatever's going on in the world is what I paint. So whether it's direct or indirect, I think these movements of people in the United States and globally are movements that inform my work and are important to me as a person, period, in the world, but also as I document my environment as an artist.
Our next question is asking if Henry Taylor is a role model for your work.
I think that there are, there are aspects of his work that that I also draw from. I mean, I think a lot of figurative painters are like inspirations to me, and Henry Taylor, being from California, of course, is someone whose career I have noticed and respect.
How does the subject matter relate to the content of the painting, and how do you think of the particular scenes that you're depicting in relationship to space and time?
Um, a lot of in terms of the spatial and environmental aspects are spontaneous. Like the image that Bonnie is in front of, for instance, with the pink background. When I did that, there was not a lot of forethought that went into it. It was sort of almost an immediate palette consideration, and I thought that as I was doing it, it began to create an interesting environment. I always want to create something wherein questions are formed, and I think whenever there's an environment that sort of creates these questions that engage a viewer, those are the environments that I like to develop and delve into. In terms of how the subject matter and relates to the content of the work, there's, I think sometimes with the titles and things like that, there's more of a packaging of that matter and content. But a lot of it, when in the creation of the work, a lot of it is spontaneous. I like to really be of the moment and in the moment when I'm creating and thinking of these individuals in space.
We also have somebody who asked if you spend a lot of times in museums.
Not lately, unfortunately, but I do. A lot of time, going to talks and things like that. Especially when I travel, I like to travel, and when I do, it's the museum shows and the museum like permanent collection whatever city I'm in. Like I make sure that I go. So these are very important to me, and it's kind of one of the lenses through which I see the world, especially when I travel.
All right, so let's see, we'll do a couple more. Was that eyes convey much meaning in personal interactions? In your figures, the eyes vary and are very undefined. What is your reason for this?
So it's interesting. So yes, a lot of the eyes are undefined, and I think um, partially it's one of my obsessions around like how light works and how individuals see and are seen within space, and a lot of times our eyes are actually undefined. Even in space, there's a lot of shadow play that takes place. There's a lot of times where our faces are very obscured, and instead of viewing a face like that in a obscured fashion, our minds, in terms of how the mechanics of vision actually create a face and create these kind of fill in the gaps where our actual mechanical vision misses. So I like to sort of play with that idea around like how the mechanics of vision are often filled in by our own memory and our own experiences. So that's one of the reasons a lot of obscure faces and a lot of abstraction around the face. But then at the same time, many of the works, especially like the one that will now be at NSU with the two figures where they're kind of looking at the viewer, the one titled "Let Me Get a Black and Mild" and the Henny, the female figure who's on the left, very much obscured eyes, but if you look closer, that there is definition, and the eyes, the sclera is all blue. It's all red. Actually, it's not white, but it is there.
Yeah, a couple people had questions in regards of your current show at a Spinello Gallery. Do you want to give us a little more information?
The show is called Only Touching the Ground to Jump, and it is about these mostly, figures within acts of performance, on some of it kind of a day-to-day basis, but it's around like kind of bargaining with um, um, the environment and society and things like that.
And there's also an exhibition there of Reggie O'Neill, whose
Yes.
work the museum also purchased and for the permanent collection. And he too was featured in yesterday's New York Times article. So, so if they go there to Spinello, they'll get to see two great shows.
Yes, and Reggie is also one wonderful painter. So if you're interested in painting, there's a lot to see for sure.
And that's something I just wanted to mention, Jared, is I'm seeing. I mean, for the last few years, we've been seeing more and more painting and more figurative painting, and it was a little slower happening in Miami. There was still a more emphasis on conceptual art by local based artists, but that does seem to be shifting, and clearly your work, Reggie's, quite a few other artists even earlier on. There was Hernan Das. So do you find that this has been a particularly conducive place to be developing as a painter?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't have much to compare it with. But in terms of working with Anthony at Spinello Projects, I do see that there's good support of a painting practice. I don't find that there's a question as to like why I'm making paintings, which is always a good start. I think that folks value the medium.
Well, and I've been so impressed by your work, and hearing, we've talked a lot about your work, but again, getting a whole new perspective today from your wonderful presentation. And thank you so much for taking your time and speaking with us today.
Awesome, thank you.
And it looks like our technology has just worn out because you're frozen again.
Oh no.
Oh, no, there you are. There, you came back to life.
Cool.
But
all right,
thank
you.
And we will be, once we get our paintings back at the museum, we will be showing them next spring with other works in our collection. So people will get to have another in-depth look at your work, and it will be with us permanently. And that's exciting. We thank again our docents, Docent Council, and Susan Miller for making it possible to add your work to our collection. Again, good luck this week. It's going to be still a busy week, and thank you for being with us. And thank you, Laura and Victoria, for your help on this tonight.